I have the honor of introducing John McCoy, who is our Assistant Director of Media Design and Web Services here at the McMullen Museum. And he has put together a fabulous exhibition from a gift of photographs that were given by Marcy and Martin Karplus. And we have about 55 works up in the exhibition right now. And this evening, we'll have John introduce those objects and delve a bit more into the context and background there. So I'm here just to do housekeeping and say if everybody wouldn't mind keeping themselves muted during the lecture. And if you have any questions as John is talking, feel free to throw them in the chat box, but we'll wait to get to them at the end when we'll read those questions, but also we can have a further conversation and folks can simply unmute themselves at that point. So without further ado, I will hand this off to John.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to start sharing this. Let's see. Okay, everyone sees that? Hi, yes.
Yep.
As Rachel said, I'm John McCoy. I'm one of several assistant directors here at the McMullen Museum of Art, and I was very honored to be able to select and do research on the works by Martin Karplus, which are in the current exhibition, Martin Karplus Moments and Monuments. As Rachel mentioned, the exhibition has 55 works. One of them is on loan from Marcy, but the gift that Martin and Marcy made almost a year ago now, I believe it was in October of last year, was of 134 digital prints. So let's go. These are prints that Martin Karplus took during his travels across Europe and the Americas in the 1950s and 1960s. These images reflect Karplus's remarkable eye for color and composition, and they also offer a window into the post-war world as seen through the lens of a deeply humanistic and inquisitive mind. The photographs capture scenes that are both timeless and fleeting. Karplus was born in Vienna in 1930 and immigrated with his family in 1938, first to Brighton and then to Newton, Massachusetts. His undergraduate studies at Harvard University focused on chemistry and physics. In 1953, he completed a PhD at the California Institute of Technology, where he was instructed by both Richard Feynman and Linus Pauling. Later that year, he began a postdoctoral appointment at Oxford University, where he also hoped to find opportunities for non-scientific pursuits. Chief among these was photography, using his uncle's Leica 3 camera, which had been passed along by his family as a graduation gift. Throughout his distinguished career in theoretical chemistry, which included positions at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Columbia University, Harvard University, and the Université du Strasbourg, culminating in being awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2013, Karplus continued his photography. This is the Leica 3C camera, and this is the model of camera that Karplus took the photographs that are in the exhibition. We actually have on loan from Marcy, and thank you very much, the original camera in a case there, so you can take a look. Leica cameras were small and lightweight, and they popularized on-the-go candid photography in the 1930s and 1940s. The high quality of the optics made possible the use of compact 35mm film, allowing many exposures per roll. Henri Cartier-Bresson found the unobtrusive camera ideal for street photography, which is the practice of capturing candid shots of people going about their daily routines. Taking photographs in the mid-century required many considerations and calculations that we don't have to do today, and which many of us have probably forgotten. The aperture size and the focal length had to be set manually by the photographer, and both of these settings affected the depth of focus of the eventual picture. The ratio between these two settings is called an f-stop, which is a measure of the ability of the camera to gather light, and that had to be taken into consideration with how much light was available, and that had to be measured usually using a dedicated light meter. Karplus took the photos in the exhibition using Kodachrome 35mm slide film. For most of the 20th century, Kodachrome was the most popular color film in the world. However, it was not generally considered a medium for art photography, which privileged black and white photos printed on emulsion paper. Color was associated strongly with advertising, and so it was frowned upon by serious photographers. Karplus, however, did not take the photographs in this exhibition with the intention to exhibit them as artwork, but as a record of the peoples and places he visited. At the turn of the millennium, Martin and Marcy Karplus, pictured here, decided to digitize some of Martin's slides for their own albums, and spent and in his autobiography, Martin describes how Marcy spent many evenings poring over the slides and selecting the ones that would be reproduced. In the year, Marcy has also said that it was very difficult at the time, as we were talking about just before the beginning of this talk, to find a service that would handle the slides and produce high quality results. In the year 2000, while Martin Karplus was serving as Eastman Professor at Oxford University, the couple were introduced to Paul Sims, a photographic technician who was an innovator in scanning slides. Sims initially made scans and prints for the Karplus's personal collection, but soon he recognized the quality of Martin's work and suggested printing archival prints for exhibitions. The slides themselves have been infrequently viewed in the decades since they had been taken, and so they retain most of their vibrant color. Karplus's first public exhibition was at Oxford in 2006. Marcy shared with me a fascinating email Sims sent her in 2007, describing some of the issues involved with scanning and retouching. Here's an excerpt. Sims writes, "The expected life of Kodachrome slides after projection is about 50 to 60 years. Some of yours are clearly knocking on that door. Whilst they are all scanned now and in digital terms cannot deteriorate any further, some might take more time to restore than is financially viable. So far, this new batch is proving difficult to work with and will take time to reach exhibition standard. These must be your elderly images, I guess." In 2013, the Bibliothèque Nationale exhibited Martin Karplus, Color in the 1950s. This exhibition brought Martin Karplus's photography to international attention. I'd like to start by showing 3 slides that I think encapsulate some of what I found striking about Martin Karplus's work. He had a knack for going to fascinating places and capturing not only landmarks and vistas, but also the busy everyday lives of people at work and play. Traveling in Europe, only a decade after World War II, he photographed a continent mending itself. This scene of German farmers on a ferry in the Rhineland shows Karplus framing the present with the past. In the background, we see half-timber buildings. that are medieval construction. The passengers themselves wear traditional clothing, particularly the woman with a floral apron and woolen skirt. Uh, However, the tractor involved, while it looks antique to us, was actually brand new in 1953. This was a Kramer K11. So one of the things that I found immediately charming about his work was this juxtaposition of old and new, the juxtaposition of historic and picturesque with people getting on with their lives in the post-war period. This picture of an agave plant shows off Karplus's innate sense for composition and for color. He's drawn to cool palettes, surprisingly accented by splashes of red or orange. He favors balanced and sometimes even symmetrical scenes that have one element or two slightly off kilter. Here we can see his eye for asymmetrical balance. The central agave plant slashes diagonally across the orthogonal lines of the landscape in a painterly fashion. There's a very conscious choice on his decision. He could have very easily walked around the plant and found a different view that perhaps showed it vertically. Finally, his gift for capturing candid shots. As mentioned before, Karplus took advantage of the Leica camera's silent operation, the fact that once the focal distance was set, it was possible to face in one direction and shoot in another to capture subjects unaware. I myself was sure that the two men in this photo were posing for Karplus, but Marcy explained that he actually was facing the ocean while taking this picture, and the fishermen here were regarding him with curiosity, unaware that they were his subject. Even so, I think these guys are natural posers. Um, so those were three photos that show some common themes and techniques. Let's look at some more works drawn from the order that they appear in the exhibition. The exhibition's first section is England, 1953-1954. Many of Karplus's earliest photographs with his camera were taken of locations in England, particularly London and Oxford. Both cities had suffered extensive bombings during the war. And in these early photos, Karplus records both heritage and recovery. In these works and throughout his entire career, Karplus sought to capture both a sense of place through scenic vistas and through candid depictions of people engaged in the business of life. This photo is the earliest photo in the show and seems to have been taken in the cruiser the cruise ship that Karplus took when he was going to Oxford. This is a scene between a young woman and a dog on the ocean liner, and it shows his taste for unposed subjects. By the way, this cruise ship, the SS Liberté, had originally been built for the German Lloyd Line in the 1920s. Its original name was the SS Europa. Docked for most of World War II, it was briefly used by occupying American forces to transport personnel before it was finally given to France as reparations. Karplus's earliest photographs were taken mostly in Oxford, where his fellowship was. He was drawn to standard scenes of the Oxford campus, but he also showed an early taste for unusual subjects, such as this flooded field, which again shows off, I think, his gift for taking what is a basically symmetrical composition and then putting it a little bit off center. This scene from Soho in London is interesting to me because the street that it was on, Berwick Street, was one of many of the streets in the area that had been particularly devastated by the Blitz. Following the war, and particularly in the 1950s, Soho became a center for recovery as a vibrant shopping district with an outdoor market that ran the length of Berwick Street. Items that had been rationed during the war, particularly textiles and food, were now available in some abundance. In Karplus's photo, you see here modern steel girder construction amidst what at the time were largely 18th and 19th century buildings on Berwick Street. I don't know if this particular construction was to replace a bomb damaged building or it was simply new construction, but it's a very forward looking photo. In this street scene, Karplus contrasts the spheres of influence of politics and religion, as shown in the two posters, and the private concerns of the passers-by. Clement Attlee was the leader of the later Labour Party and had served as Prime Minister from 1945 to 1951. The 1955 election, which is what this is a poster for, would be his last campaign for Labour. He then became a member of the House of Lords after elevation to a peerage. The second section is on Karplus's travels in continental Europe. The Europe Karplus toured in his VW Bug. If you come to the exhibition, you can see a self-portrait he took that shows the VW Bug he co-owned with a friend. Was only a decade away from the carnage of World War II. However, Karplus chose not to photograph destroyed buildings or desecrated landscapes. Instead, his often picturesque subjects reflect a tourist's mindset. But the photos also demonstrate an ethnographic approach towards people, buildings, and tools, often caught in unposed moments. Karplus's sense of place is rooted both in the timelessness of the location and the transient moments of its inhabitants. Karplus wrote in his autobiography that his return to Europe was a personal homecoming. His family having left for the United States in 1935 to avoid the spread of Nazism, living first in Brighton and later in Newton. So when he came back to Europe, he felt like he was reclaiming something of that heritage that he had lost. And in fact, many of these photographs were taken in the countries that were most involved in the war, France, Italy, and Germany, amongst others. In this scene, we see something of a nostalgic window into the continent's pre-war past. But it's also a scene of people getting on with their modern lives. The two women in the foreground are wearing fashionable contemporary clothing as they walk through the medieval Rhineland town of Braubach. This photo, by the way, didn't come with the town, but the steeple on the back is the distinctive St. Mark's Church that how I was able to identify the city. Here's a shot from Austria, from his return to his home country. This is the Schönberg Palace, which is now a World Heritage Site. It was built and renovated in the 1740s and 1750s, and it was the summer palace for the Habsburg family. During World War II, the palace was used by Nazi security and military police, and after the war, it was requisitioned by British occupying forces. The palace was turned over to Austrian control in 1955, the year that this photo was taken. I don't know whether this was before or after that because there's no date of this exactly, but this is a building that is filled with meaning and history, and yet Karplus has decided to focus instead upon the young toddler who's pushing the pram in the front. And this is again what I find so charming about his gift for capturing momentary, fleeting moments in the midst of history. Karplus also traveled extensively through the former Yugoslavia, um, which has since, of course, dissolved into its constituent countries, but at the time was united under communist rule. I was curious to know more about the costuming in this scene, and fortunately, I was put in touch with a theatrical costumer, David Rickman, who said of this photo, "The lady seems to be wearing traditional garments, but very casually. These are her daily clothes, not her finest festival garb. Women's dress in Macedonia consisted of a long sleeved chemise over which was worn a short vest, and then a very long one, called a dzuba, then an apron. Her head wrap, which in festive day dress can be quite ornamental, here is simple and practical." And one other Yugoslavian photo. There are more in the exhibition, and there are many more in the gift we were given. This is the Studencia Monastery. Um, this is the Serbian Orthodox monastery founded in 1130 by Stefan Nemanja, who also established the medieval Serb state. Its walls enclose two separate churches whose architecture is a blend of Romanesque and Byzantine, a style called Rashka. The monastery is another UNESCO World Heritage Site, having been awarded that in 1986. And in the foreground, Karplus captures a man drawing water from the monastery's well, a time-honored technology still at use in the post-war world. In 1956, Karplus traveled to the American Southwest, visiting landmarks, ghost towns, and Navajo and Zuni reservations. The 1950s were a difficult time for Native Americans, as the U.S. government was actively terminating its obligations to many tribes, as well as pushing for their assimilation into the general population. Karplus's dignified photos of Native subjects celebrate family and culture. Many in this group of photos seem to have been taken at the same time at the 1956 Navajo Nation World Fair at Window Rock, Arizona. This fair has been held annually since 1948. Here's a scene from the fair. In this scene, of these attendees, we see another example of subjects unaware that they are being photographed. In Karplus's autobiography, he describes these subjects as trying to make out just what he could possibly be photographing. This photo reflects the romantic tradition of framing a landscape by including a viewer. The most probably famous example of this is Caspar David Friedrich's famous The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. I spent some time trying to figure out who the woman was in the foreground. Marcy confirmed that not even Martin could say, but she certainly adds an enormous quality to this work. This is a horno, a mud adobe oven. Hornos are heated by wood fires that raise their interior to white hot levels of 650 degrees or more. The resultant coal and ash is then swept to the back of the oven, and a variety of breads are cooked at much lower but persistent temperatures. By the use of perspective and an emphasis upon the rough textures of the surface, Karplus presents the oven as both humble and monumental at the same time. I think he's done a remarkable job of bringing the oven to the foreground and sort of subjugating the home behind it. We have a section we've called peripatetic scenes because while Karplus was a constant traveler, And the gift of photography to the McMullen Museum contains a variety of photographs from around the world that are singular in their subject matter, not conforming to a specific group, but all of which show Karplus's humanistic and cosmopolitan attitude. Amidst the civil rights movement, Karplus captured scene of racial diversity. In this section, we see a good mix of traditional and modern subjects. Here's a scene taken in Urbana, Illinois. I mentioned earlier that Karplus's first professional appointment was at the University of Illinois, Urbana. This photo was taken in the midst of the civil rights movement. And here Karplus shows a scene of desegregation where the remarkable thing is that the easy mixing of races is presented as wholly unremarkable. This photo was taken only 3 years after the construction of the Frank Lloyd Wright Museum, which was designed in 1945. The Guggenheim was delayed by World War II material shortages and post-war construction costs. The upward spiraling design, meant to direct the flow of viewers past individual works of art, was highly controversial at its opening. In response to this avant-garde setting, however, Karplus focuses on the foyer, using diagonal asymmetrical composition in which the raking shadows of the visitors become a major feature and in which the work takes on its own abstract expressionist composition. These ships are the iconic junk, which is a flat-bottom wooden form used for cargo transport, incorporating living quarters for long journeys. After the Chinese Revolution of 1949, the junk was particularly associated by Westerners with Hong Kong. When Karplus took this photo, Hong Kong was still a colony of the British Empire and a hub of industry and trade, as well as being the window through which tourists could look into pre-revolutionary China. So again, we see Karplus's taste for both nostalgia and the present. This section is on a series of trips that Karplus took in 1956, 1960, and 1965 to Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. His travels in the Americas occurred as these countries navigated their place in the Cold War split between West and East. Mexico emerged from the war with a strong economy that was increasingly intertwined with that of the United States. Brazil, on the other hand, weathered volatile politics, including military coups in 1949 and 1964, and it occupied a neutral space internationally, trading with both Western and Eastern Bloc countries. In these photographs, as in with the photographs of other regions, Karplus strikes a balance between timeless scenes of landmarks and native people on one hand, and contemporary scenes of changing culture. Karplus's visit to Brazil coincided with the move of the capital and two of his photos to the city of Brasilia, which is now the capital of Brazil, and two of his photos show the Capitol Plaza and its buildings under construction. This is a scene of Brasilia under construction. This is what is now called the Three Powers Plaza. And today, if you were to go to Brasilia, this plaza is entirely covered with cement. It's a paved plaza, and all around its perimeter are all the buildings of the contemporary Brazilian government. However, at this moment, there's only visible in the background the Supreme Federal Court Palace, which was designed by Oscar Niemeyer, who was an important architect behind the construction of Brasilia as the capital city. In the foreground, we see the statue called Os Candangos, which is usually translated as the warriors. But the phrase was also used as a dismissive word by Afro-Brazilians to refer to Brazilians of Portuguese descent. The sculptor here was Bruno Giogi, and who was commissioned specifically to make this as a symbol of the new Brazilian uh, kind of the new Brazil coming out of the past. And what I find fascinating about this picture is you can see in the foreground there are floodlights, and they are being powered by long extension cords going off into the distance. I find it amazing that they put the statue up before they paved the place or even wired the place, but they did. This is a scene taken overlooking Rio de Janeiro. The city is well known for being nestled in amongst steep hills, which provide spectacular views. As with the scene of the Grand Canyon, Karplus here uses viewers, the schoolgirls, as both a subject and a framing device for the landscape. The almost symmetrical scene is punctuated by touches such as the plane landing on the one side and the tree being off to the right. This photo was taken in Cusco, Peru. And it's interesting to me that Karplus used nearly the same framing in this photo as he did for the view of Braubach we saw earlier in the presentation. And again, it pairs the timeless architecture with contemporary passersby. And if you look at Karplus for a while, as I have, you'll notice that he had some favorite vantage points. This is one of them. He also liked to take scenes that were taken from about 20 yards away and slightly higher than the subject, maybe about 10 feet higher than the subject. I'm going to end this part of the presentation with this fascinating photo. This is called the mural in the background is called El Pueblo a la Universidad al Pueblo, which means the people to the university to people. And this was a it's a mural, but it's not simply painted. It's a mixed media work that was done by David Alfaro Siqueiros at the Open University in 1952. It's the title of the university is actually the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and this is a late in his career work celebrating the ideal of publicly available education. But in Karplus's photo, the student in the foreground seems not to take any notice of the imposing museum, the mural, and is busily running, I guess, to this next class. And so that's a taste of what we have on exhibit. I tried to limit myself to just a few examples from each section so that I could talk about them and we could discuss them uh, in this question and answer section. But if you come to the exhibition, please spend the time and see. There's many more photos, and we couldn't cover them all tonight. So. Um,
Well, thank
uh,
you, John.
yeah.
And I want to open this up in case anybody would like to ask a question or share a comment or anything that comes to mind. You're free to just unmute yourself and join in.
Hi. You might take note as well that all of these images are exactly what Martin took. There's no cropping. They are all the entire frame of the slide.
We also have a question here in the chat that asks, in the photo of the chapel, what are the items on the ground in the front?
So hold on. Could you repeat that?
So in the photo of the chapel,
Yeah.
what are the items on the ground in the front? The 1130 structure.
Let me take a look. The photo of a chapel. Um, is I hope so. I think I have the one that you're thinking of. Let me share it to make sure I am right. Um, is is this what you're talking about? This photo, is this the one? The
Yes.
this is actually a monastery, and let me zoom in here. We'll see if we can figure out what's there. Uh, whoops. Ah, so I'm looking at it, and um, it looks like uh, probably if I had to guess, I would say that those are shingles for the roof. They're regularly formed. I think they're ceramic shingles. If that answers your question.
And we have a thanks very much. I hope we can visit the exhibit sometime soon from Peggy. And Kay returns and says, yes, they might have looked like coffins. But give it just another second in case anybody has any questions or wants to hop in.
I do want to take a moment here to really thank Marcy for this wonderful gift, and it's occupied a lot of my thought recently. I come to this primarily as as a historical approach. I'm very interested in the subject matter of the works, but I am fascinated to know more about the actual story of Martin's life, and I'm very grateful for everything that you've shared that way. Um, and I find it particularly fascinating looking at his works that he seems to have lit upon on his own some of the themes and techniques that like, as I mentioned, people like Cartier-Bresson uh, also employed, and I think that comes again from this highly, I think, curious approach that he took towards the works. He takes a lot of photos of people in cultures that are not his own, but they are never treated like they're some sort of an exotic other. They're treated with dignity and curiosity.
Good.
We do have a, oh, go ahead, Christian.
Oh, sure. Okay. If there was other questions, go ahead. That's fine, Rachel. This one.
You go ahead.
Okay. So, John, thank you, and for the Karplus family. This is wonderful. I've peeked at the exhibition. I'm also at BC, and look forward to spending some more time with it. So I'm glad I could join you between things this evening. I'm noticing in this that some of the photographs are oriented towards the portraiture. It's often those kind of sideways shot. That was kind of interesting to realize that the subjects weren't being cognizant of the photo they're being photographed. I notice in many of those there's a kind of a shallow depth of field, right, which accentuates the subjects, whereas others, like obviously that one of the mural in the Autonomous University, there's shot at, I guess, a longer focal length there, where you're getting the more light, more even. So I wonder if you might just comment on that, John. I'm sure you've noticed
Sure.
The compositional shots and the depth of field since you were talking about that.
As I mentioned before, you had to set your focal length manually in with these old cameras, and in the case of the Leica, you didn't have a modern day what we have with SLR cameras or with mirrorless cameras, where you can look through the finder and actually see what through the lens. You're not seeing through the lens. You're seeing with a rangefinder. You're only able to sort of resolve the distance between you and the object. And Karplus also had a viewfinder, which was attached to the top. It still was not able to, you did not see through the lens, but you saw a much better approximation of what the scene was going to be. However, it was reversed because they didn't have pentaprisms in them, which are what in a modern camera turns things back and around so that you can see them the right way. So he had to do things thinking always on the fly as he was going along. And what he would do is he would set the distance, on the lens, and then he didn't have to be looking through the camera. He could just point the camera at things while he was looking at other things. And as long as he maintained the distance, it would be fine. But for anyone who has taken photographs, that typically the further you get from a subject, if you try to use a telephoto, if you're trying to focus in, what you end up with is a much greater ratio between the focal length, which is the length between the lens and where the image resolves in the camera, and the aperture size. And when that happens, whenever the aperture size is larger in that ratio, more light comes in from all different directions. And that's usually what we think of as as like a wide angle shot. And those tend to be sharp, much more sharp in longer distances. In the cases of these shots, though, of course, you have a very narrow range in which something is in focus, and so that was something he had to keep in mind. And again, there was a lot of science involved in what he was doing.
Yes, I remember that.
The art of what he's doing, and that was just the realities of being a photographer at the time.
Yeah, thanks. Right. I just appreciate. I was just noting with appreciation that he's composed the shot, even though it's kind of spontaneous. That he's kind of calculated a depth of field. He wants a certain effect. And then it was great, Marcy's comment saying that in the post processing, the digitization and enhanced color restoration work that was done, that the framing was natural. There was nothing cropping. I mean, it's kind of nice. I mean, it really, you could see that was part of the composition as well, even though it was done very, very quickly. So one can imagine, the other shots, on the on the film that were not used, right? These are selections from many shots that were done. So anyway, it's quite interesting explanation.
That's a good point to remember.
In the context, right?
Yeah, when you had film, you were kind of stuck with you had 20 exposures and that was it. You stuck with those. You didn't. Today we just run through our phones and delete everything as we go along. But that was not the case.
And you had to wind the film too. I remember this. I'm bad with this. It was more of an SLR at that point, or myself with my Polaroid, and I only have 20 shots for the day in my cartridge, or 15, I guess it was. But no, it's quite interesting just kind of to think about all that going into the photograph. So anyway, just an appreciation for the photographs themselves and how you presented them, John. Thank you.
You're asking, I got a question here. Can we repeat how he got to travel so much in so many places? Well, when he was in Oxford, he had the opportunity to spend a lot of weekends going to the continent, or he traveled around England, but he also had opportunities to visit the continent. And there's in the photograph that Marcy lent us, which is his self-portrait taken in a hubcap. He's actually waiting for the ferry to go to Denmark. So at the time, you could ferry your car over, and he and a friend who was another postdoctoral appointee at that point had bought one of the first internationally available Volkswagens. After the war ended, Volkswagen started producing cars for export, and he and his friend owned one of the first models of those, and they could ferry that across from England and drove all around Europe in that. And so it's possible to do if you have the time and you're just willing to drive a lot. Once he got into America, I imagine he had more opportunities to take extended trips, because these were planned trips at that point. And it's interesting to me where he went. He went around the U.S., but he also went to the Americas. There are photos from Hong Kong later in his life, because he continued to take photographs all his life. There were photos from the subcontinent. I was in India. It seemed like there was one photo that I saw that was from perhaps Indonesia. He traveled into China when it was open to Westerners. So he continued to take shots all his life, and also towards one of the last series he took were people in Harvard Square. So he took that same sort of ethnographic approach to street photography, literally outside his window.
So many of the trips in the later 50s and 60s were also ostensibly scientific trips. So he had a colleague at Urbana who came from Brazil. And when Aaron Cooperman returned to Brazil, he invited Martin to come and give a scientific talk and, of course, to visit the area.
Are there any plans for a book or catalog? Unfortunately, we didn't make a catalog for this. However, I think you can still purchase the Bibliothèque Nationale's catalog if you look it up. It's in both French and English, and I think German too. I'm not sure. And it's if you just check it out, I think if it's not still in print, it may be available through a used book service.
Well, if there aren't any additional questions, then I want to thank John again for a wonderful presentation, which is also being seconded in the chat box with Stephanie Mitchell saying, "Wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing his stunning photographs. I'm struck by his sense of composition and line, such dynamic framing, the construction site, the flooded field, the SS Liberté, and such a pleasure to see." So again, I also thank you, John, for taking time in your evening to present this to us. And I hope everybody has an opportunity to see the exhibition. We also are planning to put it up digitally on our website as well. So if you aren't able to make it, you should be able to walk through virtually. So tune in for that. But Thank you again, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you, John. That was
Thank
really
you.
great.
Thank you so much, Marcy.